Today on Five to Survive, we welcome Susan Wardell from the Holland Township School in New Jersey. Principal Wardell, welcome. So I'm so pleased to have Principal Susan Wardell joining us on Five to Survive. Thank you, Susan, for taking time out of what I can't even imagine is a busy day and a busy time right now.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. This is a topic that's very important to me, and I know that it's important to get the word out on PE and how it should be part of every child's daily existence, not only in school, but even on the weekend. So thank you so much for having me.
That's brilliant. So I describe myself, in the words of Rene Dubos, as a despairing optimist. And with this horror that we're all living through right now with the pandemic, I'm hoping that maybe from this chaos, something good can come. And specifically what I am rallying for is physical education for every kid, every day, and every grade level. In all the millions of meetings you've been having with the pandemic, has physical education come up on the radar at all?
It has, and it's come up in two separate ways. The first way it came up was during our lockdown, is that we made sure that we built in time to the schedule for students to have outside play. Now, it looked good in theory because we would say from 10 to 10:30, all students are to get away from their computer, go outside and play, or, do a go noodle. But we put them on the honor system saying that they would log it, but we didn't have any special way of knowing if they actually did it. Now, fast forward to today, we are figuring out how to do physical education without students actually being near each other and practicing social distancing. And on top of that, we're trying to limit the amount of students that come in contact with each other as well as teachers. So we're probably going to have PE in the classroom. So while they'll be doing activities, it's certainly not going to be what they would typically do on the field or in their gymnasium. So it's actually a big problem that we're trying to figure out how to build it into the schedule, on top of already trying to make sure that they're physically active in a typical school year.
And I know in your school, there's a big percentage of kids who are playing organized sports outside of the school proper.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue that we know is a problem across America is kids don't all have equal access to these organized sports or organized activities. And the worst grouping of that are women of color, who just have the smallest percentage of play. Do you or do you know of anybody in your community who's trying to address that problem, or anybody in your school?
I would say from my experience, we don't necessarily have that concern, but it is something that, if I was in a position in, let's say, a different district or a different socioeconomic area, that it would be something that we would look to see if there were intramural sports that we could host after school with courtesy busing. As you know, being in an area where parents have the ability, transportation isn't a concern, cost isn't a concern. So we have that where we are, thankfully. But yes, it is definitely a problem, especially if it's not like a walking district for students to have access to after school activities, especially if they have both parents that work. So it becomes a catch-22 because we want them to be involved, but then there may not be enough money for the district to provide courtesy busing. So they have to make the choice. Do I walk home 3-4 miles, which is technically against the law as well? So there's so many different rabbit holes that you run down when you try to make things right. But at the end of the day, if you don't have the resources, it's difficult to get students to be involved.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question now that no principal wants to hear, but having lived with an educator for 25 years now, my wife would have the principal come into her classroom and give her some pointers about teaching, or at least clap her on the back and say what a great job she's doing. I get the feeling that principals are less inclined to go into a PE class and give that PE teacher some pointers if they see the kids maybe not engaging in more aggressive activities or running around. When you go to your conventions and you guys are, does this topic come up?
I'm going to say that sadly, no. The focus really isn't on. I don't want to say things outside of English and math and standardized tests, but that really is the focus of almost all of the professional development opportunities available, the workshops that are available, and I even fault myself because when we have our professional development days within our own building, the focus is usually on team building, and then after team building, coming up with common assessments for English and math. And we just tell the PE teachers to go work on their own, and that's not okay. So I will say that, I wish I can do better, and actually talking to you is going to make me more aware. And I do think that when we start having these conversations more, we are going to start to look at the social emotional development of children more, especially with the pandemic. And I think that PE will naturally come into that conversation because of the science that shows how important it is for students to move and interact with one another. So I'm looking at this as almost a happy accident that we have the pandemic, so we can start to have different conversations, not just honed in on standardized tests.
I know you've read part of the book where I introduced the PE czar.
Yeah.
I envision this person as being a state office holder, being appointed by the governor, somebody with some reputation perhaps in the state, and helping the school districts, whether it's with resources, but perhaps more importantly, taking that problem away off your desk. In other words, making sure that the PE that the kids are getting, limited or not, is of high energy and of high value. And again, after you guffaw, what's your general sense of the PE czar, perhaps for the state of New Jersey?
I think it would be great because I think the more contact people specific to a subject, in this case PE, that can provide those resources and that support to principals. And I'm also the curriculum coordinator in my district. So having an actual person to contact would be very, very helpful because we all need to surround ourselves with people that know more, because that's what they say. You want to be the least informed person in the room surrounded by everybody else that's more informed. So having that type of contact person, I think would be a benefit, because that is a conversation that I think needs to be had. And there are districts that are all over the place with, how they value and the importance they place on PE. So I think that it just needs to be something that's a little bit more visual and in front of our desks, more than just a conversation that we see, at a webinar, 30 minutes, and then we don't visit it for another, year and a half.
So your last question now, Susan, and a perfect lead into this. All states have standards, and Iowa just added standards in the last 2 years or so. So now all 50 states have PE standards, yet essentially no state is following the standards that they have. And in my own survey of athletic directors across the country, they were very honest in saying, no, we just don't, we can't do it for whatever reason. Would it be easier as a principal to have a mandate coming from Trenton saying, this is what we expect, because we know academics are tied to fitness, and this is what we expect for PE, every kid, every day, etc. Would that make your life easier or harder?
It would make it easier because when you have mandates, then there is no wiggle room. So for that piece, it would be a godsend. The difficult piece would be that a lot of our scheduling comes down to the time in the school day, how many hours are required, let's say, from the state for ELA and math, Also taking it into account, each teachers union in each district has a different language relative to either how long they can teach for a certain block of time before there's, like a preparation period or a lunch period. So I think ultimately it becomes a staffing need, and I think if the districts have enough money to put aside in order to staff the proper amount of people that it would take to have PE every day, then I think that's a conversation that can see the light. But if we're working with the resources that we have and the state aid that sometimes gets taken away, that's when it becomes difficult. So I think that to have a mandate would be great. And then if there were supports that comes with the mandate, then it is something that could definitely happen.
Well, I didn't send it to you, but we have a big part of the book talking just about that money issue and where we find that money. So, Susan Wardell, I can't thank you enough for being on Five to Survive. I wish you luck. We saw our local principal, who, oh, by the way, it's her first year. She just got hired a few months ago. Exactly.
Oh my gosh, poor thing.
And I just can't imagine what you guys are lifting right now. So thank you so much from us and from everybody in your district. But we really appreciate you coming on. Take care now.
Thank you so much. Take care.